Okay, so I've typed in all of the text. I didn't add anything else to the table yet. I just added in, the table headers, the table data that is in the body. Down at the bottom of the body, I have those two bottom rows that have headers in them, but they're still not quite part of the footer. It could be argued that they are part of the footer, and you could do something different with it, but it's okay to do it this way. And then the final row is in the table footer. So we have all of these rules and we have all of this content in there, the data in there. So I save that and I refresh it. And obviously that doesn't look like I wanted it to look, right? So a few things need to be done here. Part of it is that I need to go to these rows that span multiple columns, or these columns that span multiple rows, and indicate in here that, for example, this 2015 should be in 2 rows of this first column, so that October 19th and November 16th are in the second column. So basically moving the November 16th over, because the 2015, it takes up those two. So it's like if you're using Excel and you merge columns or you merge rows. That's essentially what we're doing here. So we're going to, let's see, the first one is this 2015. And because it's spanning multiple rows, I'm going to use row, I'm going to make a space. Row span is the attribute that I'm going to use, and I'm going to set that equal to 2, because I want it to span 2 rows. Now if I save that and refresh it, now the October 19th and the November 16th line up as I expect them to. Part of my issue here is that I'm taking up too much space for my text editor, but I think it's going to be fine. So I need to do the same thing down here for the 2016. That's also spanning rows, or 2016. It should be spanning this time 4 rows. Okay, good. Things are lining up a little bit better. I need to do the same thing with my rows down below. My header rows, my cost of 6 individual luncheon tickets and my cost of season luncheon ticket, cost of a season. Okay. And these now are in 1 row, but are spanning multiple columns. So now I'm going to use the call span instead. And the call span, that's going to go across 3 columns. And this one is going to also span 3 columns. And the savings too, I guess. Okay, and save that and refresh. Well, it's lined up like it's supposed to. It's messy, but it's lined up right. Okay, so let's use that and keep moving. So that was all on page 369. Let's move on to 370. So now we're going to add CSS for the table to the main.css file. So now we're using the main.css file because that's the one in this HTML up at the top. Remember those link tags? So we're using the normalize, which is just, which is just setting a little bit of kind of standardization across various browsers. But basically, we're putting the code in the main.css, or we're putting in the CSS in the main file. So in the main.css, I'm going to make whatever changes I need to make. So I'm also going to keep in mind, and it even tells me here, that to do some of these classes, to do some of these styles, I'm going to want to use classes. It's perfectly fine to do that. It's also fine if you make the long paths like we did with the menu. But it's certainly fine to do classes and expected really that you'll do classes because there are, for example, multiple rows that you need to have a bottom border on, for example. But before we get to that, let's go ahead and open up our main.css. And of course, we'll look and see that there are no styles yet set for tables. Of course, we know that because we've been working on this and we didn't set any styles. So let's go get some. And the book just kindly suggests that you copy some in from a book application, which is perfectly fine. Alternatively, because you have the solution, I would just go get the ones from the solution. You're welcome to put in other styles and then fix them to be this, or alternatively, go pick up all of your anything that applies to a table and applies to a table and copy and paste it in. Sorry, my mouse and I are not getting along together. Okay, so I'm going to copy all of this because all of this refers to the table. So anything from the table all the way down to the THs and the pseudo classes down below. I'm sorry, pseudo elements down below. All right. Did I take? Yeah, I did take all that. Okay. And this falls, it makes sense to put that. Yeah, it makes sense to put this under the article. You know, I probably even there would go ahead and give myself a new comment. Sorry. A new comment. Again, Control/ will give me the comment outline or outsides. And I'm going to say there the styles for the table, even though the solution didn't have it. I would put that in anyway, just to be organized. And then I'm just going to paste in all of the solution table information or table CSS. And now I'm going to come back up and look at what I've just added in. So I have now the border collapse. Remember what that does? It gets rid of some of those spaces between the borders in the table. The table header and footer now will have top borders and bottom borders. So that was, again, the header, that top row that we used, and the bottom row with the savings. That's adding in borders. Okay. The table header, the THs and the TDs. Now we'll get some padding and some text align. That makes sense. The T-foot THs, so the TH and the TD within the footer are going to be right aligned and bold. So the savings and the 30, they'll get bolded. Now the THs are already bolded just by virtue of being THs. They're centered and bolded. But we're adjusting some of that. And then it goes on to talk about these border bottom and right. You notice the period in front? That means they're classes. So these are elements with class border bottom and class right. So let's save that and refresh and look at this. Okay, well, that looks pretty good. That looks quite a lot like what we have in the book, but some of these didn't apply because we haven't yet set the classes. So we need to figure out what should have a border bottom class and what should have a right class. So what do we want to be text aligned right here? It looks like, and it's pretty typical that when you're talking about money, that you would have those text align right. So I think we'll go back through and set our classes, or set my classes in my HTML. And normally we don't have the CSS first before we have the HTML, or before we finish the HTML. But in this case, it's useful to look back and forth at what we've already been given. Again, you're given the solutions so that you can compare back and forth. But also just so that we see what we're working with. Again, we're given these solutions for a reason, and hopefully we can then apply those in the future to our own assignments and our big project. So I'm sorry, so let's go ahead and go back and find out what needs to have a border bottom class on it in the HTML. It looks like, if I'm looking at the textbook on page 369 correctly, under that November 16th row. So this November 16th row, maybe that should have a class of border bottom. And also April 18th the same way. That should have a class of border bottom. And, oh, I'm sorry, I got rid of my, okay, my little angle bracket there. I had to get that back. And now if I refresh, if I save and refresh, oh, nothing happened. I think I might have mistyped. Yep, it's a border underscore bottom. See how easy it is to make those mistakes? That's the sort of thing you should be finding on your own and be able to fix. Okay, save and refresh. And now I'm testing again, and I see that it's there. Still doesn't look quite right. Might need to do a little bit more adjusting on it. But I'm going to kind of pause here and move forward a little bit.